kids really do this super well, right? In annoying ways. Like you tell them something and they'll say why, you
Yeah.
know, and then
Yeah.
you tell them the answer and they'll say why, and you tell them the answer and they'll say why. And really, what they're searching for isn't the answer. You know, they're looking for a more beautiful question. They're trying to understand more
Yeah.
and get to an answer less. Certainly you can keep on giving them answers, but you'll never satisfy their curiosity.
Hard work, work. Hard work, that's what they say. Hard work, work. Hard work, I earn my pay. Hard work, work. Hard work, do it every day.
Well, welcome once again to another Work Ethic podcast. I'm sitting here today with my buddy Ryan Polonio. We've known each other some time. Do you have any idea how long?
Yeah, I'm gonna guess it's been at least 15 years at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Man, time just keeps on clipping away, don't it? Well, I
you
tell you
have
what,
less hair on your head for
I
sure.
have a lot. Yeah, it's migrated to my face a little bit. That's definitely true. Well, I'll tell you what, for those that don't know you so well, why don't you just jump in and introduce yourself to everybody and talk a little bit about what it is you do, and we'll kind of just go from there.
Yeah, certainly. So, my name is Ryan Polonio. I currently am just a guy that works at my job, but I've had several hats before. I was born in the U.S., grew up in Belize, which is in Central America, and came to Tampa for USF for college, where I worked with InterVarsity Christian Fellowship in ministry. So, a lot of what I do, I say, what I think, it sort of goes into ministry space as well as just ordinary workspace. And then professionally, I'm a trainer, and I do and manage e-learning. So I'm in that sort of internet space where I work for a sales company that manages e-learning, which is extremely popular right now given our current circumstances. And Ministry wise, I've served with the Tampa Underground. I've been one of the governing elders for some time. I've been an elder. I've worked not on staff, but I've worked in a variety of different capacities, both teaching and speaking. So right now, I am currently not doing that, but I am working on building up some media. So I want to do some writing, and potentially get out here in this online space with some of the ideas I have around faith and culture, and everything in between.
Well, I look forward to digging into some of that. So, yeah, and for those listening, the context of our relationship has mostly been kind of in that intervarsity underground space, kind of the ministry side of things. I realized actually, like I've known you, like in terms of your work, I'd be like, oh, I know you're on the computer, I know you can work remote, but I realized, like, even that I didn't even have a lot of like framework for the context of the e-learning and things like that. Has this been a time of real boom for you guys in that field? Because so, like, you've been able to work remote, you've been kind of used to this Zoom call world, kind of video conferencing, or doing kind of more online where you're home based or able to work out of co-working space or whatever. So not as much of a transition for you in the, I don't know, the this pandemic
Hmm.
situation where everyone's kind of trying to adapt and learn how to do that. Maybe that's been a little more normative, but has there been a big change for you guys or boom in the actual space for e-learning? Has this been
Yeah, I think
easier?
so. It absolutely has been busier in some ways and not busier in others. Obviously, we're a business that depends on people spending money, so everyone is counting their pennies at this
Hmm.
time. And our clientele are bigger companies, so the paradigms that I'm used to as a trainer can be everything from me being in an actual classroom with 20, 30 people, and me, droning on for 8 hours a day for 3 weeks or something like that, to being in an online space. And I've used several platforms, some of the Adobe Connects and, GoToMeeting. It's so weird that everyone is using Zoom now. I swear maybe like 6 to 8 months ago, not a single person was on Zoom, but here we are. But
Hmm.
utilizing online space to do training as well. So I'm used to using sort of the online platform tools, engaging a crowd of people, or merely just holding a room for that space. I've been doing that for some time now. Um, it's interesting to me as a sort of like a, my kids are using it now, my parents are using it now, and
Mm.
you know, it's funny how we can catch up to technology when the circumstances allow for us to need to do that.
Need a little kick in the butt maybe for some of those other generations to kind of engage. Well, really for all of them, frankly, like
Hmm.
most of us were not kind of utilizing that space. You referenced before you were born in the US, grew up in Belize. I know there was some other places before you were in Tampa, Florida, um, on the West Coast, right?
Hmm.
Why don't you I, I typically try to ask people about their earliest years and earliest memories of work, and I figure like I want to hear a little bit about your journey throughout those spaces, and then maybe even just speaking to some of your earlier experiences, like as work as a word took on meaning in your life, like what memories come to mind, what significant maybe posts along that journey, and then kind of share that story a little bit.
Yeah, so I am the son, the oldest son of an immigrant family. Both of my parents migrated from Belize in the 70s, and so I was born in 1980 to an engineer father and an insurance saleswoman mother. They got divorced long before I can remember, and so my own sense of work, my work ethic, my way of thinking about what it means to work hard, uh, still came from both of them, but really mainly from my mom. I grew up in a single parent household, so my brother and I, uh, we were given a lot of responsibility very early on. You probably heard people talk about being latchkey, and I was absolutely one of those kids.
Hmm.
As the oldest, I was responsible for making sure my brother and I got to school on time, got home on time. We locked the door when we got in. Make sure everybody did their homework because pre cell phone, you place one single call to your mom to let her know you made it home, and then you got to make sure everything is done from doing your work to making sure that that frozen chicken is taken out because if it's not, then nobody gets to eat
Hmm.
when my mom gets home. And understanding that her not being home all the time was a function of her own sense of work ethic, which is like we have food to eat because she's grinding, we have electricity, we've never needed anything when we were in a single parent household because my mom kicked ass when it came to selling insurance. Um, and so
What kind of
you
insurance?
she sold life insurance.
Okay.
So that's one of the hardest insurances to sell, in my opinion, to ordinary people.
I hear
You
it's
know,
gotten easier the last few
yeah.
months.
Oh, sure. you know, it always changes. I think there are mitigating factors, right? It's like people are thinking about dying, but also people are thinking about the money. Because really, my mom would tell me the sale is the easy part, right? If you're any but a bit good at like convincing someone of the value of something, then that's not hard to do. It's the continued value of that over time, right?
Mm,
So in order to actually maintain life insurance, you have to continue to pay your life insurance premium.
mhm.
And, certainly for a couple months, that might not feel like some type of way, but, a year later, you're looking at that premium and you're like, man, I don't know if I should be doing this. I feel healthy. Why am I
Mhm.
really paying this money into this life insurance? Of course, the people who end up needing it are like, I'm so glad that I did that, right? But the people, a lot of times, insurance lapses. So a part of her job is not just merely doing the sale, but it's maintaining a relationship with the people she sold insurance to maintain a low lapse, sort of like a ratio,
Mm.
while also continuing to network with people to get more people. I think she understood that there was a natural failure rate, right? So some people may not actually make it, but she had more people buying and maintaining the insurance than she did people losing or lapsing on their policies.
Nice.
And she did that while we're in LA,
Okay.
California. I grew up in Southern California, so LA kid, Laker fan for life, all that good stuff. Um, but we were able to move and immigrate back to Belize on her insurance saleswoman career. And then when we got to Belize, she was able to crack that market and start from scratch and still be as successful, if not more successful, in a different culture, in a different environment, a different country. Different people have different values for that paycheck, for their money. um, and so she was able to sort of contextualize the skills that she got working as a life insurance saleswoman in, or underwriter as they call them, in the US, and then doing that in Belize as well. So I had all that around me, sort of like, maybe passively filtering into me. It isn't like she took me along with meetings or something like that, but I would definitely see the awards she would receive every, year as like the top saleswoman. And I definitely appreciated, having a Super Nintendo when I asked for it.
Yep.
Um, and counting the cost too, because there is a flip side of that coin. You work hard, um, and that means that you might have to make certain sacrifices.
Right. So, okay, you were in Belize until how old?
I left Belize in 2000, so until I was about 20, and
Okay,
so
so
I did all
you
of yeah, I did
sorry.
all of my high school there.
Mhm.
A little bit of elementary school, which they
Mhm.
call primary school. It's a British system, so they call it different
Yep.
things.
Yep.
And then I, um, you know, I did a little bit of college. So I did my associate's degree there as well.
Hmm. So you did come straight to Tampa from there. I guess I had like where you were rearranged in my own memory. Um, so you were in LA earlier on,
Right.
or
It's like a bookmark. So it was like LA and Tampa, and then Belize is like the in the middle of the
ah,
sandwich.
and the bulk of your adolescent life then.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so then you got to Tampa, and that was college,
Mm-hmm.
university, and okay,
Mm-hmm.
which was probably we probably not met not too long after that because that was the kind of context that you and I first started getting to know one another.
Right. You were this dude from ACC, you were like our sister group over at USF. So I remember immediately meeting you and really kicking it because you were, super down, yeah, good vibe, um, and everyone wasn't like that.
Hmm.
It was still a weird time where people were feeling themselves out, but I think your individual crew was way more open, and it was just way easier to connect. While USF, I think it was a combination of people thinking themselves maybe more important than they really were, because I'm not at HGC or something like that,
Hmm. Hmm.
and just the sign of the times. Every decade is transitional, so this is a transition. LA to me represents the transition from like the 80s to the 90s, or the 80s. Belize represents the 90s, and so Tampa represents the 2000s.
Hmm.
um, and so with that does come like changes.
Now, what about work? Like, not work? I keep trying to divorce the work and vocation or jobs, but like, kind of growing up. What? So you guys end up in. Sounds like you were in Belize early enough that there probably wasn't a lot of jobs prior to that, right? So then, like,
No,
what were your earliest, like, I don't know, employment, engagement, and kind of work for yourself?
man, I really love teaching people stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's always been my thing. So, one of my first jobs was, I got hooked up with somebody that wanted like a technical person to teach like, computer classes to kids. And so that was like a marriage made in heaven for me, because
Really?
I'm really into anything technical. And so I didn't think that I liked teaching, but man, I got in that classroom and felt like I was in my element.
Huh.
So, I did that for summers. I also, after high school and after getting my associate's degree, got an opportunity to teach high school. So I taught high school for a year. So I taught 10th, 11th, and 12th grade math and integrated science. And I love that too. I loved being in the classroom. It isn't more like a control thing. It's like there's a like a magical thing in me where when someone gets it and the
Mm.
light turns on, like that is, I'll do that for free. you know
Mm.
um and so, every job that I've gravitated towards since then has had some element of teaching or training. And then you know me from like a even like a ministry perspective, I'm really in my element when I get to be in a room and I get to talk to people,
Hmm.
and hopefully teach them something. But more, it's about perspective. So like I majored in math at USF, and so that gives the impression that I'm some kind of like analytical or I don't know if it's left brain or right brain type of person, but really it isn't about the solution to me. It's about the problem. And if I can get someone to understand and see the problem, to change their perspective, that's really the goal, because you can solve any problem at that point. But if you get focused on the solution, then it really limits what you can actually do. I see the same thing with my own children, where they'll get so laser focused into just tell me the answer, tell me the answer, tell me the answer. And I need to get them to be able to ask the question, to ask a more beautiful question, to think about not just solutions, but uh, you know, uh, process and um perspective. You know,
So yeah, I'm really interested. I want to kind of like ask you to dig more into that. There's a lot. It seems like there's a lot to unpack there, but like it's interesting. So as you were kind of getting in, using saying like teaching was important to me. I like teaching people stuff. I like seeing the lights come on. I feel like I'm in my element. And then as you kind of walk through to go, well, but it's not actually about the solutions necessarily as like some engagement in the process, or even using the phrase beautiful questions, right? Like that
hmm
there's something. It's interesting to me because my mind is a little like that stood out among all of that, especially when you're talking about like math and like the tendency toward analytical, where like I guess the overlap this is like the overlap of logic and I mean this is philosophy, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah, that's exactly what it is.
logic and so like as you kind of as I see you kind of light up at that, I just want to like ask you to scratch at that, dig more into like whether it be with your kids or others you've taught. Like I'm and this could be the content of this whole conversation if you're interested in that,
Mhm,
because I'm like, so you've got this sweet spot and teaching and exploring that, like for someone that does that and for everyone listening, we're all in places, whether we have kids or whatever, where we have to like engage and help teach. So having a teacher to talk about teaching and actually your kind of conviction around process and perspective is super intriguing. And so I can you just kind of unpack that more?
I can. So, we're in an age where we have access to all the information, you know? We have smartphones and tablets and computers and
Yep.
all the things. So if you want to know the answers to questions, the process that we engage in is simply typing into a search bar and getting your answer.
Hmm.
I come from the old school where that wasn't even a possibility. You had to, pull a book off of a bookshelf, and either you knew it was there or you'd have to read it and possibly not even find the answer.
Yep.
Um, but maybe get closer and closer. It's like a search for an answer until you realize it's not the answers you're searching for. You're looking for process. Who
Hmm.
has the time to continually laser focus to one book to do a quote when you can memorize a quote, or absorb an entire way of thinking. And math is a good example of that, right? Where I remember as a math major, being in a room like surrounded by whiteboards and uh, surrounded by chalkboards and working on a question with a bunch of friends and not getting the answer, not getting the answer, not getting the answer, and then finally, after being able to see all of our work, realizing the fatal flaw in our logic, and then uh, being able to go backwards and then realize how easy it was to solve something. I remember doing a similar thing where we worked with one of our high school math teachers, and we are doing the same thing. And I ended up saying, we don't actually have to do any of this part. We can just cut all this out, and this is actually a shorter, formula. And he was so amazed. He was like, "I think you just discovered like a new." Like process here. And I think I did not discover that. I think I found it in like this old textbook. So, you know, I'm not responsible for creating some kind of new math or anything like that. But you know, is to say that there are ways in which even as experts, we think there's a single pathway to something, and in actuality, we just haven't really thought about new ways of getting to either the same result or being willing to experiment to the point where we can come up with better results than what we initially intended. I think there are some levels, ways of thinking, or some industries that do this inherently or naturally, while there are other things like school that teach us like the goal of a particular exercise is to get to the answer. And I think there's way more to be gained in the sort of like help me understand process than there is help me achieve answers. As like a general philosophy, it's something that I think about myself. It's not just about math; it's about almost everything. People who know me think that I'm contrarian, and maybe I am. But I'm always interested not in what you are merely trying to get me to think or say, but you know what is the root of something, or you know, maybe there's a different perspective to be understood by this thing. Um, I hope I answered the question. I feel like I
Yeah.
was rambling a little bit
No, well,
there.
that's good. It's opening up more. Well, one, you said like often in school they're going to teach us like the goal is to get the answer. Because I'm as you were talking about teaching, I kept thinking this isn't what school does, right? Like in so many, in my experience, this isn't what a lot of school does. And so you're like, school, you said, well, is like the goal is to get the answer. But like you said at the beginning of that, yeah, but I have Google. So
Mhm.
if I was in school and the goal was to get the answer and I could just Google all the answers, then I win. However, it doesn't work that way in
No,
reality. So there's still like a way you got to show your work or you cheated or whatever. There's some sort of an interesting thing taking place where you would seem to think that what was important there was learning how to get to the answer, right?
right.
However, I think you're still illustrating quite well that that isn't necessarily what's being propped up. I'd love to hear you just muse a little bit on the school system, on what you see maybe with your own kids' education. I'm assuming they're in a
Yeah,
normal school system. Yeah.
I have a middle schooler about to go to high school, and then I
Mhm.
have an elementary school kid. And you know, this is always top of mind for me. Right now, they're at home, so I spend a lot of time working with them, thinking
Mhm.
about them. I'll recount a time where I was working with my kid, my youngest, and he was doing fourth grade math, right? And he's working on this assignment, and the assignment is he has to try to figure out area and perimeter. Um, and when I look at the question, it's like this sort of like multi-level question, and he is failing at it completely, and he is frustrated to the point of tears. So, you know, he's like, "Daddy, help me get the answer." And generally, he doesn't like to do that because he knows that I'm going to like poke and prod at what he knows to make sure that it's not an issue of he can't get the answer, but it's like an issue of like, oh, there's something that there's like a gap in process here.
Yeah.
So he usually waits till the last minute to do it. He does it. He's frustrated already, so he's looking at me like, "Don't do this, Dad. I just want the answer."
Just
And
grace
an
and
hour,
mercy here.
yeah,
Fill the blank.
and then an hour later, you know, we're both frustrated, and you know, but I have the data that I need to figure out what's going on, right? And I send an email to a teacher. Let's back up a little bit. Um, you know, the question, you know, is, you know, basically using an existing perimeter, which is like the sum of the sides of a shape, right? In this case,
Mhm.
it's quadrilaterals, it's squares, it's rectangles, to determine what the missing side is, and then using that missing side to now calculate the area of something. You know, so I just made something very complicated sound very easy, but there's a lot to that that requires you to understand those things first before you can get there. First thing is um, understanding what a quadrilateral is, right? So it's something that only has four sides, understanding properties about that. So like if it's one that, you know, the opposite angles are equal, that means that the opposing sides have the same length, right?
Mhm.
These are like sort of identities in geometry, for instance. If they all have the same length and the same angles, they could be a square or a rhombus. Um, and then understand the formula for perimeter, which is the sum of the length, two length plus two width, and the area is length times width, right? So the teacher provides those formula, but doesn't really explain some of the basis behind the shapes. And so he's looking at the formula, he's simply trying to plug in numbers, but he doesn't know why he's doing it, right?
Yep.
He doesn't know what he's doing. And so I start poking at that and realizing he has zero foundation in what he's doing. And the teacher who, we're doing online learning, right? So she's provided some videos where she's teaching the class and then expecting them to do the same thing. And then she provides like some documentation, doesn't dive into those basics as well. And so the issue is, he's being asked to build like a car, and he's given, all the pieces, but he has no idea what a car even is,
Right.
right?
Yep.
So, you know, if he gets it right, it's only on accident. So now I work with him backwards, and I'm like, well, let's talk about area. Let's do some practice questions. Let's do our perimeter. Now he's super frustrated. Like, I gotta do more work to
Right,
get
right, right.
to solve this one question that I have. This is unfair. I'm like, man, the world is unfair sometimes, you know. And so I write this long soliloquy to the teacher, basically outlining the flaw in the lesson. And I'm like, the point is not to be critical, but to say, uh, I need to understand what you would like us to do to help support the learning here. Because in my opinion, all of my kids' teachers know this, and my kids do too, is learning for a kid is a team effort between the teacher, the learner, which is the kid, and the parents to support
Mhm.
that. And if all three of those things are happening at a constant clip, you know, we can move forward. But if I'm not doing my job, then that's going to hurt the kid. If he's not doing his work, then he's hurting himself. And if the teacher's not teaching well, then he's got no hope.
Mhm.
So, reiterating that, I'm saying, what would you like us to do here? And she was like, man, I had not considered that we're missing this information. This
Mm.
was something that was supposed to have been taught in third grade. This is fourth grade, so you should just remember that. Which is, I'm like, um, there's so many things you're taught. There's no way he's gonna like go back to some like idea of area and perimeter, just now bring that here and to be able to do this complex question.
Mm.
There needs to be some review. And
Mm.
so she agrees, and they start doing some reviews. I'm like, is it just my kid or is it all the other kids? And turns out other kids were also struggling with this. And so, and normally this would be something that would be supplanted by a classroom experience, right? So if I'm like, what am I doing? I could just go, hey, Miss So and so, and then they would then turn, say, oh, okay, and they would adjust on the fly. That's not something that you can do in a virtual space. And so it takes a very unique understanding of the process to make
Mm.
sure you're thinking about your learner and where they're at in their headspace, not merely the lesson that you're teaching. And I think that's been helpful. I think ever since I did that, it's been helpful both for my youngest. So now he's he able to catch up. She assigned him like the 50 math problems. He didn't like that, but after he did it, he
Mhm.
was, he was able to do his one question with no issues. I tell him it's like shooting free throws. He's like, because he likes to play basketball and I like to train him. And I'm like, Daddy tells you the same thing every single time you take a shot. Even if you make it or miss it, remember your technique. Get underneath the ball. Support it with your palm. Your other hand's your guide hand. Bend your knees slightly. Envision where you're shooting the ball at. Follow through with your release. It's the same thing over and over again.
Mhm.
Repetition, muscle memory. This is going to allow you to be able to do this well. He's like, and I asked him like, does Daddy make my shots 100% of the time? He's like, yes. And I'm like, no, that is absolutely not true. Um, but I make it a lot because I've
Yeah.
practiced. I've spent hours doing that technique over and over and over again, and it'll work for you too. You just need to practice.
Yep.
You know, he's like, but I can't hit a 3-pointer. I'm like, you're right, you can't. Do you know why? And he's like, because I'm not big enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm like, no, that's not it at all. You could probably do it now. It's just technique. You're
Mm.
practicing the basic technique now so that you'll be ready. Because one day you will be big and tall enough, and that's not going to make you hit that 3-pointer. You
Right.
know, it's really the skill that you'll need to be able to do that and do it well and do it efficiently and with, you know, and with a good rate of effectivity, right? That wasn't a word, but effectiveness.
It's really interesting though how like a question about, I mean, it makes sense that a question about teaching goes immediately into training. Like the overlap of those is so substantial. I mean, that's even your career. You're like, well, I'm a trainer. Like I
Hmm.
train. You're a teacher. They're the same, right? And yet, like in some sense, I don't know. It seems like, oh, I can learn this technology or this formula and apply it and see how it works. But there's something about repetition, training, and actually developing yourself in your own capacity to maybe use a tool that you've been given. It's like, yeah, I have the tool, but maybe I'm missing some things in the process. Are you familiar with, I want to say it's Angela Duckworth. She wrote a book. I believe that's her name. She wrote a book called Grit. Um,
I feel like
is
I've
a
heard of that.
Yeah, it's pretty well known. But what came to mind, and I'm gonna I'll get it good enough to kind of communicate to you. But there's this, they do these studies with kids where they find, and what made me think of this is you talking about being surrounded by whiteboards, trying to figure
Hmm.
out some problem. So they would give these kids these basically impossible math problems, um, like maybe they don't even have an answer, you know,
Hmm.
and they're just going to be like, work on it, work on it, work on it, work on it, and observe them. And most kids are going to be like, crumple it up, throw it away, frustrated. But there's like something in certain individuals that they find as like a temperamental trait where the kid is just working and working and working and working. And they're like, hey, how's it going? And they're like, I love this. I love learning. And they're like, they're not actually learning anything because this is make believe. Like we just gave them a problem that's unsolvable, but they won't. They're like lockjaw onto that problem. I'm just curious how much you find, be it with kids, education, in your workplace, in the places you work, how much you find like temperamental mm, tools and obstacles in the individuals you work with, right? Like
Yeah.
how you as a teacher approach different people differently because of maybe what they're working with as a temperament, as a personality.
Yeah, it varies, right? So I feel like because I've been, if I call myself a trainer, it's because I spend a lot of time doing adult learning too, right? And adults are actually very, very different to teach than high schoolers and different to teach than children for reasons that vary, and it doesn't have anything to do with aptitude.
Hmm.
I think it has to do with like expectation of what a thing is supposed to do. So when you're a trainer, the whole idea is you're training them to do a particular task or function, right? Creating a widget, you pull the lever and it creates a thing, and you do that over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And you require a certain proficiency. That's what people pay you to do so that you can continue to make them money. While teaching is more about the learning itself and about the learner. Uh, I think you still need to understand how people learn in order to be effective.
Hmm.
So, that there are some people who just naturally take on to learning, like
Yep.
that's really their thing. You start pouring information in, and it's like a sponge. They just start to absorb it uh, as much as they can, and not in a way that's linear. It's just give me all the information, and they'll start making the connections
Mm-hmm.
themselves. And there are other people who their brains don't function that way. You cannot give them unrelated pieces of information and expect anything to happen from that but frustration and confusion. It's like finding a way to play with a toy and realizing, I remember when we were a kid, you had those toys that were like cut out blocks and you had to fit them in the individual spaces.
Mm-hmm.
There are some kids that's what they found joy in, and the other ones were just like, I just like playing with blocks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes these fit in these spaces, but they don't have to.
Right.
Their inherent value isn't based on your ability to fit it in the space or not.
Hmm.
And so with people, let's say there's a thing that you need to learn, right? So regardless of learning style, it doesn't matter. I have to learn how to do this thing. I tutored math for many years, and so a lot of the people that you tutor are never the people who learn quickly. There are people that they're like, I can't do math. You can't help me, but I'm willing to take the time or pay you to help. And eventually you can get to a place where you can to do that, but you have to understand how the brain thinks,
Hmm.
and then begin to not necessarily unlock anything, but just sort of touch on that button. That's like that kid who's looking at that unsolvable problem and is okay being in that space, okay being in a space where I don't feel, because I think everyone's aversion to the problem has something to do with your internal state, like I am uncomfortable not knowing.
Hmm.
I am uncomfortable feeling out of control. I am uncomfortable being confused. It puts me in a weird space when time is passing and I don't feel like I'm moving forward, you know? And the solution that people have in their minds is, well, I just need to be able to move forward or I give up,
Hmm.
you know?
Man, that's so good. And it applies to everything. I mean, as you're like the idea of the internal state. It's funny. I heard about a friend of mine the other day. His wife was getting confused about something. We were all
Hmm.
talking, and she was getting confused. And he said, "Oh, be careful. Confusion is very close to anger." Meaning, she's getting confused. You're gonna get hurt next.
Yeah,
Which I got a
because
kick out of. But it's like you're uncomfortable not knowing. I'm uncomfortable being confused. And it's exactly what you're saying. It's like there's something about our internal state and the unacceptability of feeling lost,
hmm
confused, disoriented. Um, so I don't know. That implies a necessary relationship with learning, learning as a learner to be comfortable with. I mean, anything you want to develop in, you have to step into the unknown. You have to go beyond your what you know to step into lean into what you don't know. And there needs to be something that compels us into that, I don't know, discomfort, right?
right.
What I talk to me about that internal state, because I think it so transcends the like immediate topic of education. Although maybe it's like this is a global truth that is about learning and growing
I
in
think
this
so.
instance. But yeah.
I think so. I think, what we teach our kids to be when they transition from kids to adult is to be competent at anything or everything.
Mm.
How to tie my shoes, how to adult properly. And so you've made it when you've achieved a certain level of competency. Even
Mm-hmm.
in a faith perspective, you are faithing well when you pray a certain way or worship a certain way or know a certain amount of the Bible. Um, but you ask anyone who's done any sort of self-analysis, and they may be more willing to tell you what they don't know
Mm.
or what they've recently learned, because the truth is that that idea of competency isn't necessarily a myth, but it does betray reality. So, because I can tie my shoes, gives me the impression that I am adulting properly. Is something that only maybe a 5-year-old might equate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But eventually we do get to a point where we feel like we've got it, and there's just so much that we don't know, and then we become closed to knowing more or learning or even retooling things we think we know, because then it puts us back in that place where we don't know. My youngest was like, when uh what age do you become an adult? So I was like, maybe 18, 21, something like that. And I asked him like why. He's like, because I can't wait to become an adult so that no one can tell me what to do. For him, you know, eh, the goal is to be so
Uh,
that he doesn't have to depend on anyone
yeah.
to give him
Autonomy.
answers. It's autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like an anti-faith concept too, right? It's like you're supposed to depend on God, but then also, you're an adult, so you don't depend on anyone. I'm pulled myself by my bootstraps. I am able to function financially on my own. I'm able to not have to ask for help. um, and I think that that behavior, that switch is anti-learning. Another way in which it shows itself out is like the way we quickly create a solution in our heads in a binary function, right? So we'll be presented with a problem and we have to immediately like create a binary set of choices. And then we ascribe rightness to the one choice and then we ascribe wrongness to the other choice. And
Hmm.
then we make sure we choose the right choice. But a lot of times we don't have enough information or it isn't actually a binary decision, but our internal sort of like compass says we have to be making the right decision in every instance, and therefore I need to create a right decision and a wrong one so I can make the right decision. When in actuality, both of them can be wrong, or both of them can be right. I know that sounds like some like weird, like philosophical stuff, but that not really.
Yeah.
It's actually we could do that from I don't know, choosing what side to eat with your dinner
Hmm.
to, it's actually scary how easily and how quickly people do this all the time. It's actually one of my pet peeves, like the regularity that people do that. And then in turn, when they're relating to me, they'll also want me to like agree with their decision making process. And I'm like, I disagree with your process to begin with. And they don't know what to do with that.
All right, so there's a couple things you mentioned, but with the one you're talking about right now, the decision making process. So I'm super interested in decision making in general, and what you're saying, what you're disagreeing with is the tendency to make something binary. Is that what?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So to go look, it's black or white,
Yeah.
uncomfortable with the gray or navigating those. Now I'm curious. Because as you say, well, maybe it's not binary, maybe that you don't have enough. You know what it is? Maybe you don't have enough info. There's something hit me when you said that because I personally, temperamentally, I think, don't like the idea. How do I say this? If a decision is presented to me
Hmm.
and the thought emerges, I don't have enough info, I push that out because I think it keeps me from deciding, and
Hmm.
I don't care if it's wrong as much as like making a decision. So, right. So it's like I can decide again. Like I make a decision. Oh, it's wrong. I can decide to change my mind. Right.
Yeah, sure,
And
certainly.
and I guess because of maybe others, because maybe and to state that as a rule is probably way too far off. Like that's wrong. Yet there's people in my life that I go, they live in, I don't have enough information. So it stood out to me in that way, like the brain crack. Like it's, I don't know if you're familiar with that old Zay Frank video, brain crack. For those that aren't, the idea of brain crack is we're addicts to, I need to know more, I need to figure it out, and we're paralyzed by this analysis that we do rather than like active decision making. I'm just curious what thoughts that triggered, because it, I know that's not what you were saying, but it stood out to me as like a, I don't know,
It
something in
is.
the process of decision making that frightens me a little bit.
So when presented with that information, people actually do respond that way a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because in the end, they're like, they inherently know asking more questions is simply delaying the response. And there are some people who will delay that response indefinitely, and that's a behavior that's like weird, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it could be real time or it could just be I need more time, but a lot of people are more willing to just not do something because they don't have any more information instead of doing the actual work of getting more information, you know
Right. Which, yeah,
of of,
like making the
of
micro
asking,
decisions. Yep.
right, of asking a more beautiful question,
Mhm.
you know and I say a more beautiful question because I think people feel like questions are ugly or difficult, and kids are way better at this, right? I think this is actually coming from a book, A More Beautiful Question. A friend of mine bought that book for me, um, which was funny because I had actually already bought the book for myself, but I guess he knows me well to know that that would have been a a good book for me, right?
Mhm.
But kids really do this super well, right? In annoying ways. Like you tell them something and they'll say why, you
Yeah.
know, and you
Yeah.
tell them the answer and they'll say why, and you tell them the answer and they'll say why. And really, what they're searching for isn't the answer. You know, they're looking for a more beautiful question. They're trying to understand more
Yeah.
and get to an answer less. Certainly you could keep on giving them answers, but you'll never satisfy their curiosity. by simply giving them more answers. But the way we perceive those questions, even in annoyance, is like, haven't I given you enough information or enough answers? And the answer is no. Now, of course, that doesn't work for adults, right? We have to decide things. We're constantly deciding things every day. From the moment we wake up, we're deciding to get up. We're deciding to work. I have a calendar that's telling me when my next meeting is, and I have to figure out how to apportion my energy and my mental capacity to be able to achieve all the things I need to do in a single day. But you know, we aren't robots. We aren't machines, and everything isn't binary, right?
Yep.
So our I think it's a sign of like a certain type of human weakness to like simply accept the binary decision and move on versus to think a little bit more, just to
Mhm.
press. In business, um, and maybe it's not business, maybe it's more manufacturing. Maybe I'm borrowing a lot of things that I've learned from the manufacturing methodology I've learned over the years, things like Lean and Six Sigma,
Yep.
where uh, you do those techniques to be able uh, to properly align your process analysis and to create process improvement. There's a lot there to that. I agree with it without having been a master of that methodology because I think it's right? Like, ask questions. Don't accept the thing that's in front of you as the only way it should be, especially if
Yeah.
it's something that's important,
Yep.
you know? Um, and then be willing to change based on the new information that you've received, which is the other hard part is, even if you do get the information that you're now lacking, what if it creates a more difficult decision? It is another gear in a person to say,
Yeah.
okay, now I'm willing to take this information. It's sort of like that weird Matrix moment where dude is like, can you just stick me back in? Because not knowing is better.
Mm.
Because now if I know, I have to make a hard choice. And you know what? Life was way better when I was just making really easy, simple choices.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that I'm dating myself with that, ancient freaking Matrix
Timeless, man.
reference.
It's timeless.
Yeah,
Well, it's interesting. So you say you use the idea of a kid asking why, and there's something like I don't know exactly how you phrased it, but what it stood out to me is like what it felt like you were saying is they have something like an insatiable curiosity. You're not going to quench their
bingo.
curiosity. And it's interesting because that goes back to the idea of grit or the one that's digging into the question. There's something in this process to learn. I'm engaged in thinking and it's engaging something in me. And I guess that helps me circle back around to this other thing because you were saying, and I feel like you were saying this is kind of like an anti learning or even anti faith kind of thing where we feel like we, well, became an adult or figured it
Hmm.
out or like we got it. And there's something about that that's like it implies the end of curiosity.
Yeah, it's
It
the
implies
hubris of
like yeah.
adulthood or youth.
Mm,
Because I think older people sometimes migrate out of that space,
mm,
and they're like, "Man, there's so much I didn't know. What was I doing?" uh, but we spent a significant amount of time in our adolescence trying to get to this place that we want to be comfortable here, we want to feel good here, you know, and in that way, it's like we have to kill curiosity. Curiosity must die in order for us to feel like an adult, like we've achieved something. Even the idea of learning has to be finite, right? So we get to whatever degree of learning institution we've made it to. It's high school, college, graduate degree. But once I get it there, man, I've learned everything I need to know. Not a single thing I can be taught at this point. I'm doing the teaching instead.
yeah. It's really good. And it like from the very beginning of this is I think what stood out to me about the idea of process rather than the answer. And it's the implying of the importance of the questions and the embrace of questioning and not knowing and curiosity. And as you know, knowing you in this other context, you've kind of plugged it in here like it's anti-faith, or I love how you used faithing as a verb earlier, like
Yeah,
you're not
right, right.
faithing well. It makes
It's like
me
adulting.
yeah. So I'm like, oh, interesting. Because I have a similar, like, there's a similar critique in the realm of faith where people talk like they know something. Like,
Yeah.
I know something about life after death, yet I haven't died, or I know something about this unseen reality, and yet I've never. And there's some kind of a major discomfort in not knowing, in the
Hmm.
questions that are ultimately meaningful. Like when you ask why enough, you get into some pretty scary places, right?
Right.
What's the point of everything? I'm gonna die. Am I just alone?
Yeah.
You can dig down pretty deep into the deepest of our existential questions, and we find that maybe we become really horrified, and for a lot of us, maybe faith becomes a
Like
salve,
a prison.
what
It's
would
like
the
a
word that comes
self-imposed prison. Like
it.
we walk into it and we close the door because this
Mm,
is safe for us,
mm.
you know?
Safe. Yeah, that's the word that, well, I was thinking something like yeah, something we cling to, which is, by the way, I think why we react so poorly or violently when we're, you know, poked in the axioms, when we're questioned at those deepest levels, like of our statements of faith or something like that, because the world will swallow the cosmos will swallow me up, is the feeling that we have, right? That why we can't let go of this life raft or this thing that we cling to. It's interesting to me that stood out, because I'm curious, like, and I'd just be interested to hear your thought on like the overlap of learning and faith, because we seem to have journeyed into this place where there's some really deep value that you could say not doing this is anti-learning and anti-faith.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and let me so, I think that it's a really interesting thing the first time you interact with a person of faith and you realize this person is actually completely closed to learning.
Yeah.
They think they know everything, and they might know a lot, you know, and uh, but there's a bunch that they don't know, and I can tell. But everyone in the room seems to think that this person is fine,
Mm.
and so my only recourse is to also treat them like they're fine, and maybe I'm the crazy one because I still feel uncomfortable not knowing, and eventually you realize the only solution for me is to also pretend like I know. And
Mm.
then eventually you're no longer pretending. It is your reality, you know? Now a lot of people that sounds dangerous, right? It sounds like a crisis of faith.
That's right.
But I would contend that you can't ever feel comfortable in being right about something if you aren't willing to be wrong about something either.
Hmm.
Faith is only worth it if it can be tested, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe it's because I am a person who came to faith like later on. I wouldn't say later on because I'm like 40, but I think I came to faith around 19.
Hmm.
You know, so I lived like a whole heathen life uh, outside of sort of like obviously I think being a Westerner, Christianity always shapes the way you think about things, regardless if you're a person of faith or not. And I grew up Catholic,
Hmm.
and was always searching for answers to faith. I had considered priesthood at some point in time, but wasn't obviously willing to take vows of chastity and whatnot.
Hmm.
Uh, but I seriously looked into it. Um, but you know, to me, the intersection between life and faith was like only gained traction when it was something that could be tested, something that could be experienced, something that could be seen. And of that thing, I'm 100% sure. Um, and if someone were to ask me to somehow transplant my assuredness to them, uh, it, I could only give them journey responses,
Hmm.
because I can only tell you about my journey. And I also want people to experience that journey. But I think a lot of times we're more willing, even in the sharing of faith, to give more tangible things like it's this, it's this, it's that. But if you really press most people, especially people who have like a tremendous amount of faith in something, they will not tell you that. They will instead tell you stories about their journey. Um, to knowing, to feeling confident. And then they won't belittle you for being a person who's, you know, starting your journey. You know, I think the problem is that middle portion, right? Where you've already started something, but you don't feel like you've made enough progress.
Hmm.
And so you have to supplant that with something else because, again, it goes to my previous statement. You feel uncomfortable in this sort of zone of like, I don't know, I'm not sure, you know, I don't know if I have enough information. And therefore you're looking for a quick exit ramp. You can either quit or you could lie to yourself or just create like an easy path forward.
Man, this is good. So I have for years like thought that there was a real, I guess the way I would have said it is a wisdom to agnosticism. There's like a wisdom to say, to just to nestling up to the fact that you don't know, right? To be like, yeah, I don't actually know. But as you talked about your own, like you kind of came to something like a certainty, but you're
Hmm.
like, if you ask me to like convey that to you, I'm going to tell you things about my journey. What's interesting is it's not, and I think we confuse this. There isn't anything. And like, if you say there is, I'll really go to the mat with you on this, but there isn't something like objective or empirical certainty, but there's subjective like I am not certain about what happens when I die, but I am certainly in the grip of that question. I know that I am certainly um, in the grip of these things. Like there's certainty around its place in my life. And if you ask me about that, it's going to be answers about a journey, right? As
Hmm.
opposed to, I know this thing that exists in some objective manner, some outside myself manner. And as you used the word hubris earlier, I think about
Hmm.
adulthood, but it applies in the same picture of that guy that you were talking about that thinks he figured it all out or isn't open to new things or learning. There's an audacity or a hubris about, I mean, what it makes me think of is that story. I don't know, that old Socrates story where he's told you're the wisest man in Athens. And this is the last days of Socrates, the book. And he's told by an
Hmm.
oracle, you're the wisest man. And he goes around and he talks to all these people that are known to be wise. And he just has a conversation with them. And he
Hmm.
leaves every conversation going, this dude doesn't know that there's a bunch of stuff that he doesn't know. It's the thing you're talking about. It's the guy that isn't open to a new idea or a new thing. And he talks to enough people that he finally concludes, like, actually, I am the wisest man in all of Athens. And it's only because I know that I'm a fool. There's something there, like, because I know that, I have a leg up. Because the blindness of that hubris, of that arriving, of that knowing that this certainty in myself or my own capacity is deadly, maybe.
It can be. I mean, it depends on the outcome for sure. But you know, I recently heard someone say, you know, ask the question, what does it feel like to be wrong?
Oh yeah, this is good. The sentiment of, yeah, that, no, go on. This is good.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, it's like, you know, the what does it feel like to be wrong? And people asking, well, it feels bad, or I feel, you know, I feel, you know, all the different descriptive feelings that people put in it. And most people will, you know, they'll correct you and say, that's not actually what it feels like to be wrong. That's what it felt like when you realized you were wrong.
It feels
You
like you
know,
know what you're talking about.
yeah. In actuality, what it feels like to be wrong is the same like it feels like to be right.
Yeah.
You know, I'm willing to be wrong about all kinds of things, but I would not be upset to some degree if when my life ends and the lights turn on and I can see the things that I couldn't see because, you know, my mortality prevents me from seeing that I was wrong. You know, I have literally lost nothing by being wrong in that sense. But some
Mm-hmm.
people do feel that way. But if I'm right, then I've gained everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm willing to stake my eternity on being wrong and on being right. And those things can both exist at the same time. You know, I also weirdly sort of admire true agnostics,
Hmm.
people who aren't merely upset at, people of faith or Christians or whatever their life experience has led them to that point.
Uh-huh.
Um, but are just like, man, I don't know. Especially if they're the people who like are the ones that are like, I don't know, but I know enough to know that there's something. I just can't put my finger on it.
Yep.
Because those are the people who I think will find what they're looking for. And for me, that process involved me finding Jesus.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm again willing to be right about that or wrong about that too. Even today, a day, uh, I make faith decisions every single day.
Hmm.
And, with the caveat, if I somehow realize that I'm wrong, then I'm willing to backtrack. And to this point, and it's been some years now, that hasn't been the case.
Yeah.
I have read stories of people who have had what would be considered in a Christian context a crisis of faith, and they've made opposite decisions,
Yep.
and then have remade those decisions again after having either some kind of experiential thing, but it isn't like an empirical evidence type of thing for most of those folks. Like you said, I think the empirical stuff only enhances the lived experience. It isn't the basis necessarily for it, and I don't know if that's necessarily heretical or not. Um, and I'm okay being wrong about that for sure. But I can only tell you about my faith experience.
Well, and
You know,
that's what I so value about that is like it's not making the mistake that you are trying to caution a student not to make in learning is to feel like you arrived at it's like this isn't that I arrived at something. I mean, in some sense, I am daily testing a hypothesis, right?
bingo.
Yeah, I'm like daily putting this to saying, look, the life and teachings of Jesus I'm taking seriously and putting into application in my life to test this this hypothesis. This is something, and like you said, like life and faith came to a place where I could test it. I could put it.
Hmm.
I could engage with it and go, yeah, I'm engaged in a process. There's a lot I don't know. I mean, I don't even know if being Christ-like is a real possibility for me. I don't even know, like how far I can take this or where does it go. And I could be wrong and I could be right, but I'm placing a bet with my time, with my life, with my family, with my resources, and working with the knowledge the best I can with the certainty that I have as I've kind of walked this path. And so if you ask me for that, I was like, well, I could tell you my story. I could tell you how that
Right.
happened for me. I could invite you into a similar journey, right?
That's
uh,
exactly right.
Rather than
Yeah.
here's the final answer for the test. Like you could have just told your son, well, if you put this down, you'll pass the test. And I think often we'll treat the question of faith very similarly. Like, oh, well, here's the answer. I mean,
Yeah.
it
And
isn't
the
the
similarities.
process or the
Yeah.
bloodshed that really mattered along the way. Whereas arguably that's all that mattered along the way is learning how to think or learning how to faith, as you
Yeah.
used earlier. I really think
My
that's a
faith,
right use of it.
my faith can't save you.
Mm-hmm.
Only your faith can. You
Yeah.
know. It's like I think that's one of the hardest things for like people who have children and they're people of faith is like, there's this weird sort of thing where it's like we really, really, really want our kids to be believers in something too. But the truth is, my faith can't save my kids.
Right.
They have to have a faith of their own. And if they don't, then they don't. But if they do, it have to be something that they develop on their own, but also with, parents or guidance from people. And the best that I can do is help them to test that so they can feel uh, they can feel okay in a space where they're uncomfortable about where they are, where they stand in regards to their faith, just as they could with a math problem that they haven't seen the answer to, but I have seen the answer, you know.
Mm-hmm.
um, and certainly I can like my youngest son will do this all the time. I mention him a lot because he's so much like me, right? It's like
Yep.
looking in a mirror. But I will tell him the solution to a problem, right? Like I'll walk him through a technique. And I remember I started off by saying I have work problems where I've discovered new techniques to solving the same problem.
Yep.
So I'll work out a problem and show him a technique, and then his immediate response isn't about the answer; it's about the technique. He's
How
like,
you got there.
"That's not how my teacher taught me."
Yeah.
Uh, Basically,
Interesting.
he's saying inherently it's wrong
You're doing it wrong.
because you're doing it wrong, but
Mm,
it had the same result. And
mhm,
so he hasn't learned to be comfortable that there are lots of different ways to get to this, to arrive to the same point.
mm.
That the journey can vary, you know, and that's okay.
That's really good. You said earlier at the beginning of this that you're venturing, or you're, I don't exactly know how you said it, but you're like, trying to engage maybe online, perhaps in forums like this. I don't know what
Hmm.
exactly you didn't say enough that I know, like the format, writing or speaking or something like that, but to engage faith and culture. And as we kind
Yeah,
of like talk through this like journey of faith and the role of faith in your life, I'm just curious. I'd love to hear what you have in mind, what you've been hoping to do or work on, or like what we're what we might be seeing.
I have like a dozen unfinished Medium pieces that I've started
So that's
and not
blogs
completed. Yeah, it's
written.
blogs,
Okay.
written form, and I am on Medium, and there's some stuff there. You know, I think of myself as a decent writer. I think I can be a really good writer if I apply myself. And so, what I've been committing to recently has been doing a lot of reading.
Uh-huh.
I think that any person who aspires to be a good writer has to be an avid reader first.
Yep.
Um, and then I also want to do some podcasting. You know, my wife and I, Keisha, we have been throwing podcast ideas around for a long time, and we've had various starts and stops, and we haven't published anything yet. But I think this is a good format to be able to get ideas out, and then to do, I think the thing that is scarier, which is to like have people experience those ideas and agree with them or disagree with them. You know, like I don't know what your commenting experiences like, but I'm sure there's some people who hit you up and are like, man, I listened to that one conversation and I have to tell you, it was complete garbage. I disagree with everything that was said on that. And not even sure if I can be your friend anymore, you know?
Well,
Uh,
I'm disagreeable enough to be like I'm totally like I'm like, oh, we're good. I'm not worried about that. And yet the reality is too that in some sense we make the anonymous or known commenters bigger than they are in reality. One, in terms of actual engagement, are people actually listening and engaging at that level? And then if they are, how much impact that really should have. Like you look at you say, like, oh, my son is learning this skill, or it's like the jump, you were talking about the jump shot situation. It's like,
mhm.
how much attention should he pay to the kid that's 3 years older that's making fun of him? Right. Like, it's like, I recognize that's going to have an impact on his little psyche. But if you're like coaching him, how much attention should he be paying to that?
That's a great question. And the answer is a lot.
Oh,
You know,
well, tell me why. Tell me why.
I think sometimes it depends on people, like, when I consider myself a late bloomer at everything. And
Hmm.
the reason why is because I cared way too much about what people thought about me as a young person.
Hmm.
Someone told me, I started playing basketball for real in like the middle of high school. Barely good enough to get on the high school team, and I really peaked after high school, while most people had already basically picked up their basics
Yep.
before then. So there's nothing like being the super tall, incapable kid on the court who's basically learning with the kids the
Hmm.
basics of
Hmm.
dribbling and shooting and doing all that stuff because you're so behind.
Yep.
But the reason why that happened is because must have been like my kid's age, and someone told me, "Man, you suck," and it did something to my little psyche, and I was like, "Well, guess I'm not doing that." you know.
Well,
Uh,
it's interesting. So I bring that. Well, so you didn't do it, or you doubled down on doing?
no, I didn't. I quit.
Yeah.
I was a quitter. If it was something I couldn't
Uh,
be proficient at or spectacular at, then I would just quit. And then
okay.
one day
Okay.
I decided not to do that.
Yeah, because you said
I poked at that button in myself and said, I don't have to quit.
that's right. Well, that's right, because before you were like, yeah, it's repetition. It's much like
Yeah,
when you were actually coaching him through it, you're like, put in 10,000 hours doing this,
yeah,
continue to grow, continue to get strong. And I would argue, I don't know, that that kid poking fun, it's like, look, dude, that's hard to listen to today. but like,
Mhm.
it's 10 years from now that like, we'll see, like, we'll see.
Right.
Right.
I could have
And
simply said, "We'll see," and worked,
yep.
and maybe I would have sucked all the time, but I could be awesome,
Well,
you
and
know?
I could say I share the same thing. Like there are like for sure. Like, and this is I'll just tell you, like it's no secret. When I was young, I was in gymnastics. I was put in
Mhm.
gymnastics quite young, and I was good at it, and I was really into it. I actually recently found these old videos. My mom like converted old VHS and reels to DVD. So a lot of them
Wow.
don't have sound. Yeah, so I got to go back and look at a lot of those, and it's funny looking at me, one running around in this little like gymnastics jumpsuit
Unitard or
as a
whatever.
kid. Yeah,
Yeah.
but also like all the kids are like I was competitive, so they're at meets, and the kids are all joking and playing on the sideline, and I have a clipboard, and I'm like looking at the other kids and like making notes and like have this really odd seriousness next to these other kids.
That is a very
Like,
John Dengler thing to do.
yeah, I was like, oh, look at you. You were always this way.
Yeah,
Like
right,
as a
right, right.
kid, look at you taking this way too seriously. Those kids are all friends and having fun. You're off
Yeah.
on the side going, I'm gonna win this next time or whatever. So what's interesting though is I quit gymnastics probably fifth or sixth grade, and
Mhm.
it is exclusively because I was being made fun of, like
Mhm.
outside of the gymnastics world, right? Like people
Mhm.
like, oh, what are you doing gymnastics for? You know, and
Yeah.
I didn't feel like, oh, I can be cool and do this. And man, it's one of those things I look back on and I'm like, man, I really regret that. That would have been, and like I wish I was doing that today, honestly. Um, and it was something I was quite good at. Anyway, I want to circle back because why I asked you that question was really to say like uh I don't know, the whether it be the podcast idea or the 12 things you have written that are like stubs, and you kind of like you're like I need to work on these or get these there, but like it's the light of day that seemed like the thing that was the real hurdle, right? Like,
Yeah, it
and then we
is.
got to get to a place to put them in the light of day. And I guess my challenge to you, and even doing a conversation right now, like the end of the week, this conversation will see the light of day, right? And it's like without a lot of editing, without a lot of work, just go, look, here it is. Because you've told me, you've told all of us through this conversation, the process matters and it's part of the process. And actually, even if it was for the sake of like being able to point to your journey of becoming something, right? To go,
Right.
it's on record, it's on, like I put it on wax along the way. And along the way, yeah, maybe my writing wasn't great, or my initial conversations weren't great, but like I would say, man, it's never been easier. Like to just like
Yeah.
you're clearly able to. We're recording right now, and if
Mhm.
you and your wife have an idea, you're gonna do it with one another. It's like just this week, set aside a time and do episode one. Talk
And
to each
just hit
other.
hit record.
Hit record at the end. Upload it,
Yeah, I was talking to my
and like
community
get
about
over
that
that
idea of
hurdle.
encouragement, like the need for encouragement. Because there are also times where I can recall being the age where you quit gymnastics, where it's
Mm-hmm.
possible there could have been like a single person that could have been like, "Man, you better keep on doing that gymnastics," and then you've been like, "You're right,
Good
I
point.
should."
Yeah.
Yeah, and then that alone is enough to get you where you need to be. And so, that's why I say he should listen to his detractors too, right? Because you don't know if you actually want to do something until it's challenged, and you also don't know if you want to keep doing it unless it's hard.
Yeah.
There is an element to work, which is the hurdle of getting over adversity, or a desire to not have to endure some type of adversity. Like when I was a kid, there are so many things in flux, and me being told I sucked at something.
Mm-hmm.
It's everything from me not feeling like a good enough little human to my masculinity or my sexuality. Like, boys play basketball, so if I suck at basketball, what does that mean for me?
Mm-hmm.
To my place in culture. All the black kids play basketball, so if I play some other kid sport, am I hanging out with the white kids? Like,
Mm-hmm.
why am I not good at basketball? So when I look at my son and he's like, man, I don't know if I can keep doing this, or this person told me I sucked, and I said, let me tell you a secret. you know you're going to be like 6'5", and that kid is going to be like 5'8". You know,
Yeah.
one day, there's certain things I can teach you, but there's one thing that that God has already given you like a natural skill for, and you just have that.
Yeah.
So and that person can't change that. There are certain things that their critique of you can't actually change, but you don't know that until you hit up against that. But let me help you see the finished product because it can be awesome. you know
Let me tell you about, just on this same kind of topic. So you remember Adrian
yeah,
Sarmiento?
yeah, the homie.
Yeah. So Adrian hit me up recently, and he's been for years doing this kind of club with the campus. So for those that don't know Adrian, he does down in kind of the Waimama Ruskin area. He's been working in the school system for years now, doing he's kind of a like dropout prevention, really working with kids and teens that are
Yeah,
kind of on the.
Nuestro Salon. Shout out to Adrian.
Yeah.
That's the homie for real.
So Nuestro Salon has been a club that he's been working down there doing that. Now, his backstory, he was a young, like youth Olympic boxer. This dude was like a seriously good boxer back in the day. And then lots of things kind of happened, some trauma, whatever. He fell out. He wasn't kind of doing that. Finds himself, went to college, got educated, finds himself back in the neighborhood, working with youth, doing a club called Nuestro Salon. Well, he hits me up recently related to this whole, it's a COVID-19. He's got more time at home. And he's like, man, I'm just thinking about these kids and I'm thinking about the needs. And it's interesting because right now, one of the things that's closed down is gyms. And
Mm-hmm.
so obviously I can't do anything right now, but he's like, it's been on my mind like forever because it's something I know that I can do. Like I can train kids in boxing because I was like a professional and I
Yeah.
still know the drills. I still know how to do it. And I got this space in the garage and he's like, we're talking through it. And he's got this idea of like what he could become. Well, if you, so this is, man, not even 2 weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
he hits me up one morning. We talked for a while and he starts brainstorming like what he could do next. And is like talking about opening this gym. And very similar to this conversation with you, like I don't
Mm-hmm.
like hearing ideas. I'm like, do it. Like just upload it, do it, whatever.
Right.
Well, with him, so he calls me maybe the next day. He's like, well, I went and picked up a punching bag. And I was talking to him about like, well, listen, dude, if you're gonna do that in your house, you need to like form a company that can get liability insurance so you don't ruin your entire life when
Yeah,
something goes
sure.
wrong, right? So he's like,
Somebody
oh,
gets like injured or
yeah,
something,
he's like,
and
I
you
don't
die.
know
You're
about
like,
that. So I was like, well, look, go to Sunbiz, do this, do that, XYZ, kind of walk him through it. And I love it. The next morning, I get these texts, did this, check, did this, check, did this, check. Let's jump on the
see,
phone. So we get on the phone and then he's like, man, I've been thinking about podcasting because I need to get in touch with these kids. I have like 13 kids in mind that I know will listen to whatever I put out that are part of the club, part of Nuestro Salon. I need to talk to them. So he started a podcast, Nuestro Salon. It's 3 episodes in the last 2 weeks. He's
I
literally
saw
just,
that.
he
I saw
pulls out
that,
his phone and he's talking to his phone,
and that's
hitting
it.
upload at the end of it using anchor.fm, which makes it super easy.
Yep.
Anyone could do it, log in, make your thing. He did it. Boom, boom, boom. And I guess just to like, to be like, I'm super proud of him right now. And I'm so excited to watch where it goes. And he is actually using the language of like, listen, I don't know where all this will go. Can I do it? But I'm putting out my plans. I'm going to work my butt off and I'm going to try to record it along the way to just show the roadmap for these other kids in the community that maybe have entrepreneurial initiative and soon enough, I'm going to want to get him on here to talk about this story, but I'm like waiting. I want to let it play out a little bit. Super proud of him. But wanted to bring it up just to be like, update you on what's happening with Adrian. And so you did see that he had put a podcast up. I know he's been like pushing it on social media and stuff.
Yeah, no, I peeped it. It's
And
just
just
real. It's
doing.
dope.
Yeah, man. And I'm like, and I just wanted to like bring him up as like an example to be like, man, it took him like 30 seconds. You know what I'm saying? To be like, all right, I'm in, let's go.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people when they start this, they're like, I need to have like a studio set up
I need the
and all this
equipment.
stuff. I need
Yep.
equipment and get on Audacity and do all like the editing and all that stuff. And man, some of my favorite podcasts, uh, it's just a bunch of homies on Skype
Yep.
recording that and uploading it as is.
Yep.
And you know, I think that's brilliant. It is something that I will still do. I think, it's again the initial problem I told you about, right? Like some people will see something as a problem, and really what they need is encouragement and process.
Yep. Yep.
I think I have information about that. Really, the question behind the question is this really something I want to do?
Yep.
You know,
That's
or
right.
like what's really preventing me from doing that? Just like that basketball thing
Yep.
is that just means I need to get out there and sweat,
Yeah.
and work and try. You know,
Well,
one of the
that
things.
answers the question if you want it, right?
Yeah, because
Yep.
if you don't actually, you could say a bunch of stuff, but the truth is,
We all do.
you show me what you want by actually doing it, right? Um, my mom is a proponent of working hard, and she's always just like, you gotta work as hard as you want. You want people to know that you want to work, and
Yep.
and that's always been true. Like my mom is also a person that plays hard,
Yeah.
and she believes in the idea of balance. It's something I've taught my own kids.
Hmm.
If you work hard, then you need to be willing to play hard. And particularly if you are also a person that plays hard and you don't work, that's also an imbalance. You need to work a little bit harder, you
Yeah.
know and you know listening to books, reading books, listening to podcasts, it triggers all these ideas, but it's all for
Yeah.
nothing if I can't get that out into something. And so, yeah, no, I'm definitely taking that. Obviously, me being a part of this is actually me working that out as well, right? Like,
Yep.
when I reached out to you maybe months ago, we tried to set something up before and we didn't get it to happen. And you're
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, now let's just do this on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
If you're listening in the past, this is literally happening on Monday in the beginning of May. It's like let's just do it.
Yep.
Throw something on the calendar. And even the calendar invite didn't even make it, but it was like, no, I'm here. Let's do this. And all it takes is to take that first step. This is as far as you're concerned, this could be the beginning node in a long journey, and it started with you. You know,
Yeah. And you're welcome to release this as your first episode if you want to be like, just chop a piece and do whatever. But
No,
like,
I'm gonna point people to you. You know what I'm saying? Like I think people need to be recognized for the work that they do. So, in collaboration, it is always good to be like, man, if you want to hear this conversation and many
yeah,
good ones, you need to hit subscribe. It actually does help when people rate your stuff, as
absolutely.
it jumps on the top of people's lists and you get more people to listen. Because not that I
Yeah.
care to hear myself talk, but I think the ideas that you're getting out are super important for people to hear, and not only just that but respond to, right? Like, you know uh, feel free to disagree with me. That's the difference that I
Yep.
have right now that I didn't have before, is I wasn't willing to stand by uh, the things that I thought or wanted to do, and to have that be critiqued
Yeah.
and to change. So like for instance, if I said something that was like wildly off the wall, I'm okay with somebody being like, man, you were like completely off there, and being like, you're right.
Yeah. Well,
you
and
know
it's a skill set to be able to look like, if I make a mistake, I'm going to apologize. If I'm wrong, I want to know better. But how else am I going to learn but attempting to try, get out there and do that? And honestly, even this conversation with you, but this
hmm
podcast conversation around the work ethic emerged out of doing a class with the underground about developing a theology of work, digging
hmm
into like at the deepest level, like what is the place of work in our lives and the meaning of this, and like what is, and I just realized for me, like you talked about a sweet spot, I was like, this is my favorite conversation. I could be engaged in this forever, and I want to be, but I don't think I could sit and write 100 articles. And yet, by the way, if you do, this is the beauty of the audio thing. It's easy to sit and talk to you and kind of try to tease out and go, like, what topics can we pull out of this? Let's dig in on process or this and that, learning styles or whatever. But then, and I would just encourage you, even as you have your own like things that you like, even your Medium articles, the half written things, if you use those as a topic of conversation, say,
hmm
the content is developed. You can just literally transcribe that and start, you have that to begin with if you're editing back into written form. So writers back in the day, we'd have a voice recorder and
That's
be like,
right. You would
you
just
just
hit the
write.
recorder and you would just start talking.
That's it.
You listen back to it, and then, because to me, the long form writing is an art,
Yeah.
and it's one that I really appreciate. Like,
Yep.
it's like hip hop, and a lot of people may or may not know this, but my man John has a love for hip hop for real.
I do.
But it's the art form of long form writing is super important. It's how you choose your words, how you are able to tell a story. It is, some people have like this like otherworldly skill. Like I could certainly read a book about the same topic from five different people, but some people it just be hidden.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
I long to be an artist with that of that caliber.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll read something from authors, like if I'm listening to something like on race, for instance, and I listen to Ta-Nehisi Coates, I'm just like, why am I even writing? This is this is
Yeah.
stupid.
No, for
You know,
sure. Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
He's too good. It's like listening to Most Def rap or something like
Yeah.
that. You're just like, yeah,
Just
certainly I
I'm
could
out
make words rhyme, but I'll never be like my man Yasin Bey.
for
He's too
sure.
good. Or Black Thought, or whatever your type of music
Yeah.
is. I also know that John has like a love for Johnny Cash, and when you really dive into that, it isn't just the music; it's a vibe.
Yeah.
It's a he's iconic not just for because his voice is, you can be described as droning or or basic, but that's not it. Like
Mhm.
to just say that is like miss the genius of Johnny Cash, the
Yeah.
Man in Black, you know, and it might not hit everybody, but when you see it, it's like beauty. It's special. And so, long form writing is something that I want to be able to engage in that way to get good at it, like I'm good at a jump shot. Like,
Yep.
you know, like when you see like certain people hit threes in basketball, it doesn't matter who's in front of them. As soon as they can get that ball up, it's in the hole. You know,
Mhm.
that is uh, a combination of skill and gifting. And
Mm.
so, but it's also an effort of practice
Mhm.
and conditioning and commitment to the process. So a part of it is exactly what you're saying. I just got to, throw up some shots. You miss
Yeah.
100% of the shots you don't take.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm intrigued by it because I totally know the feeling. I'm trying to think what it was. I remember there was something. I forget what it was, but there was something I read, and I remember like going, "I'm done writing." Like
yeah.
there's,
Why would I even do that now?
and yet the folly of that really. I mean, there are always going to be greats, and actually, the beauty of that is someone to aspire to learn from, to whatever. But it's like, yeah, you're not gonna be you're not gonna be most deaf.
No,
As a matter of fact, even if you had the capacity to be most deaf, you shouldn't be most deaf. You should be you,
correct.
right? And find your voice and your gift. Because, and this is like, I don't know, in some sense, coming back to your like idea of a beautiful question, is recognizing, well, it's similar to people being uncomfortable with not knowing, uncomfortable being confused. They're uncomfortable being who they are
Right.
wherever they are, right? And in some sense, like finding some sense of knowing, like, I'm I'm me, I'm proud of me, I'm going to be unapologetically me, and I'm going to try to like do my best version of me, right? Like to put that out into the world, and get, and with time, with reps, I'm going to get stronger, I'm going to get faster, I'm going to get smarter, and my flow is going to be tighter, to use your hip hop analogy. I hear you typing away. What are we doing?
No, there's a quote that I didn't want to misquote, and
Yep.
it really comes from Erica Badu, and
Okay.
I think she just said it in like passing. Uh, but she said, "I'm an artist and I'm sensitive about my shit."
Yeah.
And I think a part of it too is just
Yeah.
like, you
Those are your
know,
babies.
yeah, it is art as well. So
Yeah.
there's a sort of sensitivity
Yeah.
that comes from the experience, and so there's definitely something you can get over, but it's okay to admit that
It's very
you
real
know,
vulnerability. Yep.
yeah,
Yep. No, that's right. I mean, you put yourself out. I mean, this is the fear of all of that, right? Like putting it into the light. It's like whether it's walking naked in front of someone or putting out your piece of art or your thoughts, you're putting them out to be judged, to
yep,
be torn apart,
yep.
which is maybe at some base level the most horrifying possibility.
Yeah, it could potentially be like the most human thing possible, the
That's
most
right.
Christian thing possible,
Hmm.
the most honest thing possible is being willing to to be critiqued. I wouldn't even say judged because
Yeah.
judged sounds so final, but that's how we feel about it from an impact
Oh
perspective.
yeah.
Like, but in actuality, it is about critique, and certainly different people's critique has different weight, but you know, uh, if you can accept things as people's opinion and it's just merely opinion, I think there becomes a point that you can actually grow. And I think that's something that lots of people should just really covet, you
Mm,
know? Like you never get to that particular growth point because you never subject your thoughts or your emotions or your internal self to critique.
yeah.
It may be like from a faith perspective, you don't even do that to God, like
Mm,
you don't let the buttons get pressed because that puts you into weird of a space. We definitely don't do it to people. And even sometimes the people who know us the most or care about us the most who are willing to do that in a positive way. And then you have the normal a-hole on the street that be like, you suck at basketball. I think there's something to learn there too. Yeah, you
yeah.
can not only learn how to be better, but you can learn uh, your resolve,
Yep.
your grit. Like the I'm gonna show,
Resiliency.
yeah, resiliency. I'm gonna show you
Yeah.
isn't always a negative thing, you know.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, that's good. And then I guess there are situations if the whole world tells you you suck at this, at some point in time, there may be a reality that's like, this ain't my game. Like
well,
there exists that reality as well. There's like this weird, like stick to itiveness and resolve, and then caution about hubris, right? Like the sobriety about like, I'm just too small, I'm too short for this game, or I'm too,
it all
yeah,
depends on what you're doing it for. If you're literally doing it for yourself, then it doesn't matter. If you're
that's
doing it
true.
to be the best
I find
of that
joy in
thing,
this. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
then you're gonna have to be okay being the best version of yourself while
That's it.
being
That's
a
it.
very average version of whatever that thing is to everyone else. Like people who exist in that space,
Yep.
man, those people are awesome.
I think that sets up this question I try to ask everyone really well, because I agree with you 100%. It's like, be the best version of you in that. And I feel like I wanted to ask you, like I ask everybody, how would you define success?
Hmm, that's a good question. Um, I think the way I answer that has changed over my life, and I'll probably answer it differently tomorrow. But that, people know me know that's just my way.
Yep.
But success is, to me, setting an appropriate goal for what it is that you want. You know, going through the process of realizing what it is that you want and making all the appropriate actions to make that happen and it actually happening. You know, like my mom used to always tell me there's no such thing as luck. It's just where preparedness meets opportunity,
Yep.
you know? And so, those things are the things you're looking for. Am I prepared for the thing I want now? Or what does it take for me to get there? And then am I looking for those opportunities? And where those things intersect, that's to me success.
Mm,
You know, there are certainly sub successes like the ability to achieve the goal of being prepared or being able to manufacture the opportunity. But man, when that magic happens, that's success, you know,
yeah. That's
and that
good.
is not a thing of luck at all, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, luck's an interesting idea. I was thinking the other day that might be something that's just a concept we use as an excuse, right? To just explain why someone else got something or achieved something or whatever. I don't know. It's just an interesting concept. Well, listen, I know you have another meeting in a little bit. We don't have a lot of time. I wanted to ask, well, just to give you some space. So for those listening, things that you might want to ask for, places they can find you, things you might want to promote, and then also just, I don't know, anything you wanted to get to that maybe we didn't at yet. Before we wrap up, I just want to leave some space for you to kind of take the wheel.
Yeah, that's cool. So, I want to highlight a particular reality going on. You know, a lot of people have been thinking about the concept or the story of Ahmed
Yeah.
Arbery,
Yep.
uh, a, a young black man that was recently chased down. They call it a modern day lynching,
Yep.
but he was chased down by armed dudes. They were white dudes, and I believe the issue to have been racially motivated because he was jogging in their neighborhood. They thought he might be the suspect of some robberies that were happening, and you know they believed that they were doing the Lord's work and jumping in their vehicle with their guns, chasing him down, and ultimately murdering him. That there is this weird reality, one that has to be parsed out over generations, and one that I have to actively parsing out to people I mentor, and even my own children, both my friends who are not black and those that are, of you know, how do we parse out this reality of, you know, living in a racialized society as people of faith, as just people who want to, you know, all see our kids grow, you know, who all want to grow old and be happy and be safe and alive. And certainly a lot of people disagree with the factors behind that. But I'm over here trying to have the conversations with people. I think that there are lots of people who are way better at that than I am, but I am willing to have that conversation to talk about those things, not as some kind of like social media, let me just retweet things, but to actually engage and discuss and you know, to try to impact the world and the spheres of influence that I have, both from a business perspective and in a personal perspective. Uh, I I occasionally write on Medium, so if you look at Medium, you look at Raikish, you can find my Medium pieces there. I have a couple different pieces that I have written over there, and I intend to write more. That's where you'll find most of my stuff. I'm also on Twitter at probably at Ryan_Polonio, and I'll probably post my stuff there. I actually detest being on Facebook, but I try.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, if there's something that I want people to see, you can also hit me up on the Facebook. Um, but, you know, I just really love engaging in the conversation. I think that it's too easy for us to have conversations in vacuums and in our echo chambers. And one of the reasons why is because it's too hard to have them,
Yeah.
especially with people who we disagree with, because you know we feel all the feels, and occasionally I jump into that space where I want to have like a discourse with people who disagree with me. Most people on the internet though are severely trolling. I have been occasionally trolled before, and I have also learned what it feels like to have trolled people and be like, yo, you are trolling, and be like, you're right, this is terrible behavior. Where I picked this up from? But
Mm.
you know, I currently lead a house church. It's called Kindred. Those are my people. Um, I you know, working, assisting my wife. She is doing lots of things, ministry coaching. She's co-leading an organization called Roots and Branches, and you can look for them. I think they have a um, an event happening soon, so you can just hit the Googles and find out about Roots and Branches for that if you're people of color and interested in engaging in that space. And then you know, I also am in love with basketball. So if you want to talk some basketball nerd stuff, you know, I'm a Laker fan for life. You know, always glad to engage that. There has to be balance. So, you know, um, you know, if you want to talk basketball, you want to talk anime and nerd stuff, you know, comic books. You know, I'm an OG nerd from like the 80s. You know what I'm saying? You know, I've been watching anime since anime was uncool, and then it was cool, then it was uncool again, and now it's cool again. You know what I'm saying? Um, and of course, all things about faith, I'm interested in that too. I think there is a lot of ways in which we are reluctant to let our theology influence the culture. Instead, we let culture influence our theology a whole lot. And I think that's backwards. And then we accuse other people of doing that when we try to press against those things. And so, you know, um, you know, holler at me if you need to hit me up. Just definitely follow me on Twitter, DM me. If I feel like responding, I'm sure I will. Otherwise, you'll find me inside my house, not merely because I'm an introvert, but because of COVID-19.
Hmm. Man, you like prompted like six other conversations. I would maybe need to do a follow up, or actually, you can invite me on your podcast that you're going to start, and then
Yep.
we can dig
Yep.
into some of those. Now, I wanted for those listening. I know this, but on Medium, just for spelling, it's Rykeish, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
Rykeish, just in
Yeah.
case the phonics wasn't enough for folks, but
Yeah. You'll see my picture. You'll see a black dude looking off in the distance. You can make your own determination whether that's conviction or confusion. But that's me.
I love it, man. Dude, thank you so much for, for taking the time to kind of just catch up and kind of have this conversation. And I would, man, I'd love to just continue to engage with you. Are you so you're staying in your house now because of COVID-19, but
Yeah.
I mean, how is that just real quick before we go, I'm curious, like as they're starting to open things back up, like how are you guys? Is this, I know you're able to work kind of from there anyway, but is this like,
Yeah. I
where are
know.
you guys at with
It's
this? Where are you guys at with this?
Man. Truth be told, no one's economy can survive without people going to work.
Yep.
And that comes at a great personal cost. And people want to be on the right side of history when it comes to the argument over, do we preserve the lives of people or do we preserve the money? The
It's
answer
tough.
seems simple, but it actually isn't simple
No,
at all.
no.
Time will always tell for sure. Like, we open back up and it seems like that's what we're doing, and everybody's fine, then it's okay. But my opinion is, nothing substantially has changed from the beginning.
Yeah.
you know we
No.
don't have a vaccine or effective ways of treatment. We're at best just a little bit more aware, and might be more willing to socially distance, although in my frequent walks to Ybor City, I see a bunch of people
Please.
not wearing masks and not socially distancing or any
Yeah.
of that stuff.
Yeah.
So, in the end, no one, this is not a situation where people want to be like, I told you so
Right.
you know so
Right.
if a bunch of people get sick again and it gets worse, like, I take no pleasure in being like, I told you so.
Hmm.
But also, if it gets better and it's fine, then I'm not going to be like, oh well, all that. From me and my family, we're going to be taking our time, we're going to be maintaining social distance. you know uh,
Cautious.
we're going to be cautious,
Yep.
and then we would love to get back to normal. We dream of, we were supposed to be flying to Belize in June, but that flight got canceled. So we want to take some time to go visit our family back there
Yeah.
and enjoy some time away from the grind. Although I work virtually, so really I'd have been still working
There ain't no ducking it.
overseas.
Yeah.
Yeah, as long as you have the internet and a computer, you can do whatever you need to do no matter where you're at.
Yeah.
Preferably on a beach with a cocktail in hand. Uh, you know,
Man. Yeah, we're all just gonna stay tuned and watch how all this plays out. But I've been intrigued by the way that I mean, if nothing else, it's given us all a lot to reflect on and
it sure
a
has.
lot to
It
look at
sure
in our
has.
lives.
A lot of you old people, man, y'all pretend like you can't use technology. I have had to fix many people's time on their VCR and help program their phone because it doesn't work right.
Yeah.
But y'all are on Zoom having conference calls and meetings and all that stuff. So you guys have lied to us,
Yeah, yeah.
and
All
that's okay.
figured it out. Well,
They
necessity
figured it
will
out.
do that.
Yeah,
There ain't no going
necessity
back
will
now.
do that.
We seen you do it.
Well, we have seen you do it. And there are a lot of things too, which I'm sure we could talk for another hour, where it's just like there are things that we believed we couldn't do
Hmm.
virtually or at home that we can totally do. And it's going to be a hard sell to kind of go back to that idea, the idea of like, and I know you had mentioned it earlier and we didn't really get a chance to talk about it, but like having to be inside an office
Yeah.
and all that stuff is like, is that the best way to get productivity out of people?
It's gonna be a
Um,
tough sell later. Yep.
yeah, it'll be a tough sell later for sure, but don't want to go down that road. Man, thank you so much for having me on.
Hmm.
I totally appreciate the time. If you guys are under the sound of my voice, definitely subscribe to this podcast, listen to it, and and also throw up a 5-star rating. That it costs you nothing to do that,
That's
and
that's
it
true.
tremendously helps keep things going and adds to listenership. And you know what? Maybe my man John could throw up a Patreon and make some money off of this thing. So,
I
definitely do that.
floated one out there a while back. It's probably up, but I don't think it's ever done anything. So yeah,
Well, definitely, that'll be in the show notes as well. So if you want to, you like this conversation, you want to hear more conversations like this, you want to hear part two of this, maybe we'll throw it behind a paywall or something like that. And, you can, you know,
that's what's up.
give John your coins, work ethic.
Hey, dude, I appreciate you, man. I know you got another meeting to skirt off to, so thank you for your time, man. And let's catch up soon.
Yeah. Thank you very much, man. God bless.
All right, you too, man. Talk to you
All
soon.
right. All right. Later.